not only was I seeing, okay, this guy's a successful fighter, here's what he did to become successful, but I was more concerned with, okay, here's a happy individual, here's what he did to become happy, here's a good
Mm.
father, here's what he did to become a good father, here's a crappy father, here's what to stay away from. So I was able to get a lot of life lessons just by hearing everyone share, the good and bad from their lives.
You are now listening to the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer and author of the best-selling book, Stay the Course, Don Brightman. And you're going to be getting some goodies today from the guest that's up next. And today on the super special, awesome highlight reel builder for authors known as the Going North podcast, you're in for a treat, baby, because it's a host to host special, baby. I'm telling you, host to host special, where two pod bookers, aka bookcasters, come together, sharing some mics, talking about stories and great stuff. And this guy in particular, my goodness, this dude right here, you're in for a treat because it's a rarity where I've had an actual martial arts fighter on the podcast. My goodness, this guy right here, all the way from the big state of Cali, loves listening to heavy metal and reading Stephen King novels. And the beautiful thing about it is that reading those novels inspired him to actually publish novels of his own. And the good thing is they're horror novels, y'all. So if you want to get scared out of your pants and your socks, heck, maybe even out of your glasses, if you have reading glasses, this is the guy to talk to. And when this guy is not writing, confined doing yoga and jujitsu with his family, or just sitting for over 100 hours of tattoos. And to make it even better and not butter, he's actually teaching himself the guitar, the bass guitar, and German as a way to help his brain recover from TBIs after years of fighting and neck injuries. So let's give it up for the fellow super special, awesome human, the podcast host, the champ himself, the one, the only MT himself, Mark Tullius.
Wow, thank you. That is the coolest intro I have ever had. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I'm so glad to be here.
And it's definitely an honor, man. Yeah, that's the good thing about the show. The intros are the best part. Until we go down the rabbit hole, we might end up talking about penguins.
That works.
Oh man. But dude, man, like love what you're doing, man. Like, congrats, glad you're still here, glad you're still on Earth, still glad you got your head on your shoulders and you're bringing some more awareness about the dangers of really getting into well, then again, not just MMA, but probably just all martial arts, especially with the sparring that involves headshots and just really being careful.
Yeah, you know what? That was one of the first things I realized when I started doing this book on traumatic brain injuries. Well, first I thought I was fine. I was only started researching the book because I had friends that I played football with at Brown University. They didn't go on to fight or do anything stupid like I did, but they were they had all these brain trauma, and they were in brain studies, and uh, I've seen more and more guys coming up with these issues, and so I started researching it, said I would write the book, and then that's when I realized not only did I have these traumatic brain injuries, but they're pretty severe, and that people can get them from anywhere. So it doesn't have to be fighting, it doesn't have to be football. There's so many that come from the military, from explosions, repetitive gunfire, and then just everyday people that I have a friend whose daughter got hit in the head with a small little ball, and she had like terrible concussion syndrome symptoms for
Ooh.
about 11 months.
Ooh.
So yeah, like traumatic brain injuries, they're more prevalent than than I ever considered.
Yeah, man, definitely could say that again. So, my goodness, man, I even forgot that part of it. So, my goodness, so went to Brown University. That's one of the Ivy League schools, man. So, what led you to the martial arts as a result, man? It's not every day here. It's like, oh man, I went to this Ivy League school. You know what? I think I'm gonna bust some heads in, man.
You know what? I wasn't your typical Ivy League guy. I got recruited to go there my last 2 years. I had played, football in California at a junior college. I had good enough grades. They picked me up, but I was a very destructive, I was looking for excitement. I was looking for violence. You know, from a very young age, I was suicidal. So I really didn't care too
Mm.
much about life. And, I think when I found fighting, I was looking to go either into the military or law enforcement. I just knew I wanted excitement, and then I found fighting. I was like, okay, this is good enough. And I should make it clear, I was a terrible fighter too. So that was one reason why I really wanted to try to understand later on, and why I did Unlock in the Cage. Like, okay, why did I fight when I wasn't any good at this sport? When I wasn't making money? When I wasn't winning my fights? Why did I keep continue to do it? So that was a big drive, trying to understand why would I be so reckless. And so that was the reason why I started Unlocking the Cage.
Oh, yeah, man. That's right. And if I'm not mistaken, my goodness, it's over 400 MMA fighters and coaches all together. Like, is their goal to like reach like maybe over 1,000?
When I started, I didn't know what it was going to turn out to be. In fact, on my first trip, my wife, she really supported me. She told me I should do it. At the time, I think I had a 2-year-old daughter as a stay-at-home dad, spending all my time with her. And I was tempted not to start the project because I was like, well, not only was I a terrible fighter, so I shouldn't write a book on fighting, but I'd never once conducted an interview. But when I started doing them, I just realized how much I enjoy talking to other human beings. Like it didn't matter that they were fighters. Like it was cool because we connected on there and we could share a lot. But it was just another individual telling me about their life, and that was super motivating. And then one person would recommend me to another person, and they would tell me to go to this other gym, and so I let it kind of flow naturally. And so I was just picking up interviews from the lowest level fighters to champion UFC fighters, and it was pretty incredible. And then eventually, I just had to realize, I was like, okay, I just need to stop this. I think my first goal was 100 interviews, and then I just kept going and going and going until I realized, like, okay, I need to actually write the book now, and put down the camera.
I got you. I got you. Yeah, man. Like, dude, that's one heck of a powerful journey. It's kind of interesting too. It's like, oh yeah, I was interviewing 100 people. This should be good. And then out of nowhere, it's like, oh wow, this is freaking amazing. So, what was probably the hardest part of just combining all of that information together? Because like 400 MMA fighters and coaches all together, like it's probably hard to decide which part of or piece of information would fit the book and the whole project.
Man, that is so correct. I had such a hard time because I became really good friends with certain individuals that I interviewed, but their interview had nowhere to go into the book. And with that many people, like, I didn't want to spend one page on every single person. And so it was very difficult trying to figure it out. And so I just did it chronologically, and whatever important interviews I was going through at that time. And but yeah, I think trying to piece it together like that was very difficult. With my brain book, I did it differently. Again, I did it chronologically, but with that one was so much easier because it was just my experiences and a couple interviews instead of, tons of different interviews to try to pull from.
Nice. Yeah, man. Oh yeah, because that definitely is hard too. It's like, hey man, we friends, right? I'm gonna be in the book, right? You'd be like, oh yeah, yep, you're gonna be in the book.
Yeah, yeah, we had a lot of that. And the one thing I did for all those people, I just had them write something, something about their journey at the end, and so they could have up to a page at the end of the book. Because I did feel terrible about, just not including them.
Oh yeah, that's right indeed. My goodness. So with all these wonderful fighters, what was probably the two big things that stood out from probably the majority of them?
Um, I think what I got to see was, I went in trying to figure out myself, like, okay, what were the reasons why I fought? And then I got to see, well, everyone has just a, there's such a number of different reasons for each individual, so you can't point to one thing. I definitely got to see, which guys were like me, that were not going to be successful, that were having losing records. Those were the tough guys, those were the guys that were fighting for, the image, wanting to have that identity as a fighter. Then there were other guys that, they might have wrestled all through high school. They just wanted to continue. They're athletic. They're, very competitive. You had martial artists that did it their whole life. And so it was cool seeing the different kinds of groups. But another great takeaway from it was not only was I seeing, okay, this guy's a successful fighter. Here's what he did to become successful. But I was more concerned with, okay, here's a happy individual. Here's what he did to become happy. Here's a good
Mm.
father. Here's what he did to become a good father. Here's a crappy father. Here's what to stay away from. So I was able to get a lot of life lessons just by hearing everyone share, the good and bad from their lives.
Nice. That's what I'm talking about indeed. 'Cause that's the thing. It's like, I guess from the outside looking in, like the Supreme Novices are like, man, those guys are probably never happy. They just want to freaking bash people's heads in and probably freaking lick the blood off their opponents and beat them into a bloody pulp. They're freaking barbarians. But no, that's like, hey, they got families here. This is especially those fighters who are lucky enough and skilled enough to get to the highest echelons of MMA and get paid well for it and get those sponsorships for it. Like they're just doing it out of respect for the art and taking care of themselves and their families.
Yeah, and that's so true. I went into this hating MMA, by the way, too. So I completely stopped watching it. I didn't like watching UFC. I didn't like watching fighting at all. I had it's like a negative, image of it. And a lot of that was probably from me not doing well in it, regrets and everything else. But once I started talking with the fighters, I was like, man, I was like, these are guys that I would just have, and I did have several of them, come stay with me at my house. I stayed with other guys at their house, got to meet families, and it's just so many good people. I do worry that lots of them may develop, traumatic brain injury symptoms, down the road, and that might affect stuff. But overall, I would say the majority were, good people that I would like to be around.
That's what I'm talking about indeed. Heck, I probably hate MMA too. Like, especially the folks you sparred against. Like you sparred against freaking UFC world champions, man. Freaking Fabricio Werdum and Frank Mir, man. Like, dude, like them guys.
Yeah, that was bad. And when I say I sparred Fabricio, like I stood in front of him for 5 minutes and took a beating. Like he took it. He was taking it easy on me. I was trying, and the coach was right there watching and making me, go. I think he thought I was a real fighter. But yeah, so that was bad. And then yeah, I used to train with Frank, and again, like I wasn't any kind of competition for him, but I was a body that he got to beat up a little bit. So but it was fun ish.
There it is. I'm like, man, like I'll especially a black belt jujitsu mask. Like, no,
Yeah,
it's only fun if you get out with no broken bones.
exactly.
Oh man, yeah, definitely the brain injury piece on top of that too. Like some of the fighters probably showing signs of it. And the good news is that you're able to find a way to really help fight against it. So my goodness, so what have been some of the ways you've been doing that?
Yeah, so I think, the very first step, and what I'm hoping my book will do is like help bring awareness, get people to actually look at themselves. Because I was looking at myself, but I thought I was fine because, that's just how my day was. I was getting through life. I was fine. So, but it's not until you really take a good look at what the symptoms are, and then look at your own behavior, like, oh, maybe I do have this. And then getting tested for it is huge. And so once like, oh yeah, I do have, traumatic brain injuries, here's something I can do. But if someone wasn't sure, well, I'd say the three most important steps are: one is getting your hormones regulated. When you have a traumatic brain injury, one of the first things that happens is there's inflammation in the brain. That inflammation stops your hormones from self-regulating. And so that could throw everything off. Like my testosterone was super low, and different things were really, really off. I wasn't regulating anything at all. And so that was causing depression and anxiety and all these different emotions that I wasn't even aware of, and it was just because my chemistry was off. So getting hormones checked with blood work, I did that through Dr. Mark Gordon. He's amazing. The other big part is, taking care of your emotional side. So going to therapy and finding out why you have these things and learning coping mechanisms to deal with, anger or impulse control or whatever it might be. And the last thing that I did was neurofeedback, and that was really big for me. That was, they map out your brain. They do a brain scan. They also test your attention and focus. And my attention and focus was so bad when I started that I was, you know, I tested for ADHD and ADD. My audio was about half of what it should have been. So out of all the men my age, I was testing probably like 40% of understanding what someone was saying to me. So if I'm listening to you, I'm really trying to pay attention. There's a really good chance I didn't catch what you were saying. And so I use that to explain, the first thing I did was take that to my wife. I'm like, hey, hon, is like, it's not that I haven't been trying to pay attention to you. It's like, I actually got a problem. Uh, but the neurofeedback was amazing, and so that amped up the wavelengths that needed to be amped up, and it lowered the ones that needed to be lowered. It improved my sleep. The first thing they tackled with that was making sure that I was getting quality sleep and deep sleep. And by doing those three things, those were huge. And then I did a lot of other little things that I suggest in the book, like learning a language, learning to play music, all these things that are just great for anybody in anyone's brain, but especially people that are getting a little bit older and that need to, maybe you're not working your brain in other ways. So here's some different ideas of what you can do, and also really dive into like breath, meditation, and that type of stuff.
That's what I'm talking about indeed. So you heard that right, folks. So fellas, if your wife's saying, "Hey, you're not paying attention," so saying, "Hey, I did a few MMA fights like before I met you." It's not you, it's me. It's a
Yep,
condition.
exactly.
Oh man, but yeah, definitely. And it's great that you're able to do those things and pick up those things, especially the deep sleep and then picking up another language, especially and if in your 40s too, because like a lot of folks may be like, hey, what the heck am I gonna do? Try to learn a language after like grade school? Like I barely got out of freaking grade school French or Spanish or something. Like learning German, like what the hell the heck is this? But that really just helps you to expand your mind. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe you're the well, that I know of anyway. You're actually the first person on this podcast who's actually done DMT.
Oh, really? Or the first person to tell you about it, maybe.
Yeah, there we go. At least to openly admit it before. Yeah.
But yeah, you know what? That is, and I'll tell everyone. I was going to do a chapter in the book on traumatic brain injury book on psychedelics because I think there is, they're amazing. They have amazing potential, but there is some risk involved, and so I'm not covering it in the book. But DMT was absolutely the most powerful and beautiful experience I ever had. Yeah, pretty amazing. I recommend anyone try it if it wasn't illegal. Um, but yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Ah, yes, indeed. And for those who are noobs and don't know about Joe Rogan in the YouTube comment section, like what is DMT for those who want a little more information?
Yeah, I guess it's probably best known as the spirit molecule. I think it's the only thing in all organisms that all organisms have in common. But when you do it, like the nice thing too is only a very short trip. I think it was like maybe 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. In the 60s or 70s, they used to call it the businessman's trip because people would be able to even do it at lunchtime. But it I don't know exactly what it is, but DMT is what floods our mind when we have like a near death experience, something we produce naturally. And but when you ingest it like that, it's pretty incredible what it can give you. And what it does for a lot of people is lowers the fear of death. I know it did that with me. Makes you feel like everything's connected. I was definitely way more of an atheist prior to it. It just makes it feel, yeah, just more of a connection to everything. It's really hard to explain for someone that hasn't ever tried it. But yeah, it's definitely worth looking up, I would say.
Yes, indeed. Because it's definitely interesting how, like, not that I'm like advocating for any of it, but it's just interesting. It's like, oh yeah, like just the fact that it actually helped you to really come out of the shell of atheism to believe, like, okay, wow, I think there really is something out there. Like, it's kind of hard to deny at this point because I guess it was probably just getting all these visions and probably like maybe even seeing the multiple dimensions that are out there that we don't really see on a regular day to day basis.
Yeah, so and that's exactly it. And it's whether or not, whether or not I was actually seeing those dimensions, whether or not my brain just created them, like it definitely gave me that feeling, and that feeling hasn't gone away of connectedness. So yeah, I think it's pretty powerful.
Oh yeah, that's right indeed. That's right. Some weapons grade transformation right there. That's right.
Mhm.
But in a good way though. Definitely in a good way. My goodness. So with all of these wonderful things that you're doing, all these interests, you also write horror novels, man. So what led to that?
That is something, well, I've always have been very, very dark and disturbed. I think I used to think of it as a really bad thing. I think I used to keep it all inside. Then when I got a little bit older, I found writing. It wasn't until maybe like 26 or so, started playing around with like cop novels and stuff like that. But then I realized I really enjoyed writing short stories, and they all ended in someone dying. So not all of them were horror, but they all had horror elements for sure. Some were a little bit more sci-fi, some suspense, but once I began that, I realized just how much I enjoyed it. I didn't realize until later on how much of a catharsis it was being able to get all those ideas out of my head. But yeah, I absolutely love writing. I love creating. I think it's definitely what I'm going to be doing probably the rest of my life.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Indeed. Yes, indeed. That would just get that out so that way it doesn't stay in your head and it's like, oh, wow, it's time to make this world a GTA simulation.
Yep.
Oh man. So with this wonderful thread of interviews that you've been on, is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often?
I don't think so. I'm pretty good talking about what I want to talk about, I think. Whatever's on my mind, whatever's interesting. I can't think of anything. The big thing is just the brain book and being able to share that information with other people. That's what I'm just so excited about. I think right now, and that's something that maybe it's a problem, but I find something that I really like, I attack it, and then everything else just isn't as important to me. Um, right now, I've been kind of struggling with that, where I get overwhelmed a little bit. Like I'm working on my traumatic brain injury book, getting it ready for this big fair in Germany in October. But I'm also trying to write new fiction. Plus, I'm trying to do the podcast, and so I think that is one of the things that I had the hardest time with is dealing with that and being overwhelmed. In fact, that's one of the things I want to talk to you about on when you're on my podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely could say that again, indeed. I guess like the power of podcasting and heck, probably all those interviews you did with those MMA fighters and coaches probably led to you really starting the podcast and making it even better and not better. Heck, do you ever think you might use and like convert those past interviews into audio form and maybe using them on the show?
That's actually a pretty good idea. Gone through. I actually have an assistant who's been going through all my old. 'Cause I have almost all of them up on YouTube, and so he's been going through them and pulling out good parts and sharing those on social media. I'm always so negative whenever I hear a good idea because in my head I'm like, oh well, these interviews are from 8 years old or from 9 years ago or 7 years ago, and so no one's going to care about them anymore. But that's not necessarily true at all. I think there is some good advice. So maybe I will take some of his clips and then I'll put them together because I think he's done a really good job of finding the important stuff in the interviews and narrowing it down to that.
Nice. Nice indeed. Yeah, man. Because that's the beauty of today. It's like, man, if you got content, try to repurpose it as much as possible.
Yeah, that's something I wasn't even aware of. Like in my head, I would share something one time. I've been terrible at social media. Like this whole new year is like, okay, I need to really start trying this. I need to really start working on marketing. I can't just only create because that's all I've ever wanted to do is create and not work on the business side. But I didn't even realize, the idea of repurposing. I was like, I would put something out once and then it was dead. So maybe 5 people saw it, maybe 10 people saw it. So now, yeah, now I'm trying to reimagine the whole marketing thing and do it correctly.
Heck yeah, man. Definitely do it. Because funny enough, like Facebook, it's crazy how the algorithm's built. It's like one of the biggest response you're ever gonna get is like whenever you change your profile picture. And funny enough, I had the same exact profile picture, I'd say probably about 2 years. And then you know how if you ever been on there recently, they have these frames on there. It's like, hey, I got my COVID vaccine. Hey, like, hey, stop the virus or something like that. And then since I'm part of the JMT, John Maxwell team, they had this thing called I'm a change maker. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just do it for fun. I put a frame over my same profile picture and then got 80 comments out of nowhere. It's like, hey, love
Wow.
the new picture, Dom. And I'm like, what? It's the same picture. It's been up there for 2 years with a different frame. It's like, what? It's just interesting how things are. So there's people that still haven't even seen some of your past work the first time that need to see it again.
Yeah, no, that dude, that's excellent advice. And that's something I definitely need to do.
Well, yeah, that's right. Especially being a fellow indie author, man, and a fellow podcaster, man. That's right. Some people, it takes them 7 times to finally pay attention.
That's true. That is true.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, since you're a fellow bookcaster, is there any, well, bookcasts like those who like to write books and have a wonderful podcast that's active, like any advice for anyone looking to write their book or start their podcast since you've done both and you're done multiple episodes of both, or say multiple copies of books, multiple episodes of your podcast?
I would say to go for it. Like if it's a dream to do it, I think life is too short to put off anything, especially if it's because of self-doubt. I think most people that have an idea to do something, it's probably the self-doubt that's holding them back. It's not knowing, feeling like they don't know what to do, how to do, that they're not qualified. They don't know exactly how to write. One of my things I love doing is taking friends that have never written before and showing them like, okay, here, this is how you write. It's not that hard if you break it down, if you do it by steps, if you actually believe in yourself and you embrace your voice. So that would probably be that was probably my biggest hold up, was the self-doubt. And then the best advice I ever got from my writing mentor was just to really embrace your voice. Write like you would think, like you speak. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't try to be like someone else. Just, you're a unique individual. So let other people see who you are. Don't be ashamed of who you are, and share that version of yourself. So whether it's on a podcast or you're writing a book, the more you put yourself into it, the more real you are. I think the better it's going to be.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The more real you are, the better it's going to be. That's right. Because they want that real stuff, y'all. That's right. They don't want that pleather jacket. They want the real leather, y'all. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right, indeed. That's right. The mighty Mark, baby. Dropping the mics, baby. That's right. Be the real you, baby. That's right. Maybe harder than it seems, but you can do it. You got this within yourself.
exactly.
Woohoo! Well, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive. And that is, if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in 2021 with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Be happy. Be happy with yourself. Yeah, I think that was my biggest thing up until a couple years ago, was just how much self-hatred I had and how ridiculous it was. So be happy, take care of yourself, mentally and emotionally, physically. And if you do that, everything else will fall into place.
Woohoo! Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. More solid gold flow advice from the mighty Mark, baby. That's right. That's right. Be happy, y'all. Because life's too dang short, y'all. And heck, life's also too dang long, too, sometimes. It's like, it's like, man, like life be short, but it be long, too, especially be holding them planks, too. Like, shoot, man.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, man. Yes, indeed. Find your wonderful square of happiness and stay on as much as you can within reason. That's right, folks. I'm telling you. That's right. So for those who want to listen to some more great advice and heck, maybe even be scared out of their pants and maybe out of their car and keep up with all the stuff that you're doing, what's the best way for folks to reach you and do so?
Everything is on marktullius.com. You can find my podcast everywhere. That's Vicious Whispers with Mark Tullius. All my books are on Amazon. But yeah, on my podcast, at the end of every episode, I share a short story or a chapter from my book. Or if I have a guest on, sometimes I'll share one of their chapters. So yeah, that's where you guys can find me.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. Check out all the stuff that Mark is doing. Pick up his wonderful nonfiction MMA book. It'll change your life and add a different realm of thinking to your wonderful brain. Heck, even pick up some of his novels for some great entertainment and check out that Vicious Whispers podcast. It'll all be in the show notes, the links to everything. So that way you can subscribe to what he's doing, keep up with what he's doing. So that way, when he keeps writing and cranking out content, you'll be able to be one of the first to know about it and grab it and hold it like a beanie baby and then hold it for like ever.
Love it.
Well, any parting words before we close up the recording shop?
And just thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast talking with you, and can't wait to talk to you on my podcast.
How's it going, you super special, awesome human? Since you made it to the end of this episode, it looks like you really enjoyed yourself. Since you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with at least 3 people in your network and tell them what you really liked about this episode. Heck, even shoot myself or the guest an email and let them know what you liked most about this interview so that way they can stay inspired to keep pushing out great work.